The night I came back to the farm, the air was thick with silence. My father's voice echoed in my head, sharp, cutting the same words he shouted years ago. "You're no son of mine if you walk away." I remembered the slam of the door, the cold stares of relatives, the humiliation of being branded a failure in front of everyone. I had left that night with nothing but anger and shame. Yet here I was again, standing on the broken soil of the place that ruined me, wondering if it could ever heal me. It started with the farm's collapse, but the real wound was inside our family. The barn roof was leaking, the cattle were thin, and the neighbors whispered about how my father had lost his touch. Every failure was laid at my feet. If a fence broke, it was my fault. If the crops withered, it was because I didn't work hard enough. He never missed a chance to remind me, and worse, he reminded me in front of others. I still remember that Sunday dinner when everything snapped. The table was crowded with relatives, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. My father, red-faced from drink, slammed his fist down and pointed at me. "This boy is the reason the farm's dying, lazy, soft, useless." His words cut deeper than any blade. My uncles laughed under their breath, my cousins smirked, and my mother, she just stared at her plate, too afraid to defend me. I sat frozen, my cheeks burning as if the fire from the hearth had leapt into me. That humiliation didn't stop there. The next morning at the local market, one of the neighbors nudged another and said loud enough for me to hear, "That's the boy who couldn't keep his father's farm alive." Their chuckles followed me like shadows. I clenched my fists, but I kept walking. I was already broken inside. The fights at home grew worse. My father's disappointment became rage. His rage became insults, and those insults carved themselves into me. "You'll never amount to anything. You're not a real man." Words like that, they don't just fade. They echo for years, replaying when you try to sleep, when you look in the mirror, when you dare to dream. I tried to work harder to prove him wrong. I woke before dawn, worked, until my body gave out, but no matter what I did, it was never enough. The farm needed more than sweat, it needed hope, and hope had already left our house. My mother's silence grew heavier, her eyes avoiding mine as if she too had given up on me. Then came the breaking point. A storm had rolled in, tearing through the fields, flattening what little crop we had left. We spent the night trying to save what we could, but by morning it was clear we had lost almost everything. Exhausted, soaked to the bone, I stood in the mud, holding a broken tool. My father turned on me, shouting so loud, the neighbors gathered by the fence. "You cursed this farm, you're a disgrace." He shoved me hard enough that I stumbled. And in that moment, with the rain mixing with my tears, I knew there was no place left for me here. That was the night I left, the night humiliation burned so deep I thought I'd never recover. But humiliation, I would learn, is only the beginning of a much longer journey. Leaving wasn't a choice, it was survival. That night, after my father shoved me into the mud in front of the neighbors, I packed a small bag, stuffed it with clothes, and walked down the long dirt road without looking back. The rain was still falling, but the storm inside me was louder. My boots sank into the soaked earth, and every step felt like I was walking away, not just from a farm, but from my family, my name, my very identity. I thought my mother would stop me, call out, beg me to stay. She didn't. She stood by the window, her face pale in the dim light, her hands gripping the curtain. Her lips moved, but no words came out. That silence hurt more than my father's rage. Silence was permission. Silence was abandonment. The city was colder than I expected, not because of the weather, but because no one cared who I was. Out there, I was just another stranger trying to make rent, trying to hide the accent that tied me to a dying farm. I took jobs that broke my back, washing dishes, hauling crates, sweeping floors. Each night I lay on a mattress in a shared apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had really escaped or if I was just running in place. Calls from home were rare. When the phone did ring, it was never my father. Once my mother's voice slipped through trembling. She asked if I was eating, if I was sleeping enough, and then just as quickly she hung up. No come home, no we miss you, just fragments of care swallow. I tried to build a new life. I thought if I worked hard enough, saved enough, I could prove to everyone, prove to myself that leaving was the right choice. But the weight of shame followed me. Every failure, every layoff, every lonely meal was a reminder of what my father said, "You'll never mow." Nights were the hardest. I'd dream of the farm, the creak of the barn door, the smell of hay, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. I'd wake up in a cramped room with peeling paint, my chest tight, my eyes wet. I hated that even in sleep, the farm still owned me. Years passed that way, me drifting them, fading further away. I didn't go back for Christmas, didn't go back when neighbors died, didn't go back when letters from my mother grew shorter and rarer. The separation wasn't just physical, it was a slow death of connection, of belonging. I wasn't part of them anymore, and they weren't part of me. But no matter how far I ran, no matter how many walls I built around my heart, I couldn't erase the truth I was still my father's son. And that truth would come back to haunt me in ways I could never have imagined. Life in the city was supposed to be my fresh start, but instead it became my undoing. At first, I convinced myself that any job, any paycheck was progress. I scrubbed restaurant floors until my knees bled, carried crates until my shoulders felt like they were tearing apart. I told myself this was temporary, that I was building towards something greater. But months stretched into years and nothing changed. Everywhere I turned, I met closed doors. I applied for apprenticeships, internships, even volunteer work. But the moment people asked about my background, I froze. What could I say? That I had fled a dying farm, branded a failure by my own father? The shame in my voice betrayed me, and the world didn't wait for broken men. Friends came and went. At first, I shared apartments with others, laughing over cheap dinners, pretending we were all going somewhere. But slowly, they moved on. Better jobs, better lives, better versions of themselves. I stayed behind, stuck in the same dim rooms, chasing bills I could barely pay. One by one, the laughter faded until I was alone. Loneliness has a sound. It's the hum of the refrigerator at midnight, the echo of footsteps in a hallway that no one walks anymore, the silence of a phone that never rings. I used to think my father's insults were the cruelest thing I'd ever endure. I was wrong. Loneliness whispers in your own voice, telling you he was right. I drank more than I should have. What began as a beer after work became bottles lining my floor. The alcohol softened the edges, blurred the memories, but it also sharpened the truth I was wasting away. My body grew thinner, my eyes hollow, my hands shaking when I tried to hold a cup. I stopped looking in mirrors. I couldn't bear to see what I was becoming. The lowest point came when I lost my job at the warehouse. The manager pulled me aside, his face half pity, half irritation. "You're not reliable anymore," he said. "We need someone who can show up sober." That word sober rang in my ears like a verdict. I walked out with a cardboard box of my things, the stares of my co-workers burning into my back. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. I thought about calling home, but the weight of humiliation held me back. What would I say? That my father was right all along? That I really was useless? I imagined him laughing, shaking his head, telling me I'd never survive on my own. And the worst part was, I agreed with him. Depression is heavy not just in your mind, but in your body. Getting up felt like lifting mountains. Eating felt pointless. Days blurred together, nights stretched endlessly. I kept a small photo of the farm tucked in my wallet, but I stopped looking at it. It hurt too much. The place that had destroyed me still owned me even from hundreds of miles away. There were moments, dark moments, when I thought about ending it. Standing on the edge of a bridge, staring at the black water below, I felt the weight of everything pressing down my father's words, my mother's silence, my own failures. The idea of falling of silence seemed almost like relief. But something inside me held me back, not hope, not courage, just a stubborn refusal to give my father the satisfaction of being right. Still, the downfall was complete. I had no family, no future, no pride. I was a ghost in a city that didn't care if I lived or died. And yet in the middle of that darkness, something unexpected was waiting to pull me back toward life. It was a letter that changed everything. A plain envelope slipped under my apartment door one morning with my name scrawled across it in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My mother's. My hands shook as I opened it, the paper thin and trembling, like her voice must have been when she wrote it. Inside were only a few lines. Your father is sick. The farm is dying. If you can come home, just once. I read those words over and over until they blurred. My chest tightened, my throat burned. For years I had told myself I didn't need them, that I was better off alone. But the truth was, there in black ink, I was still their son, and they were still my family. The train ride back felt unreal. I stared out the window, the city shrinking behind me, fields rolling out like a memory I couldn't escape. My reflection in the glass looked older, worn down, nothing like the boy who had stormed away in anger years ago. I wondered if my father would even recognize me. I wondered if I wanted him to. When I stepped off at the small rural station, the air hit me like a ghost, thick with the smell of soil, hay, and rain. The same air I had once hated now felt like home and exile all at once. I walked the dirt road toward the farm, my boots kicking up dust, my heart pounding. The house came into view, smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the porch sagging. And there on the porch stood my mother. Her hair was grayer, her shoulders thinner, but her eyes were the same. She didn't run to me, she didn't cry, she just nodded as if to say, "You came." Inside I found my father. He was thinner too, his once broad shoulders hunched, his breath shallow. The sight of him hit me harder than any insult he had ever thrown at me. This was not the man who had towered over me, whose voice could shake the walls. This was a man beaten down by time, by illness, by regret. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes searching my face. Finally, he rasped out the words I had never expected to hear. You came back. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just those 3 words. But in them, I heard something else need. My father, the man who once called me useless, needed me. The days that followed were awkward, silent at first. We moved around each other like strangers, careful not to stir old wounds. But the farm itself forced us together. A barn door needed fixing, the fields needed clearing. My father couldn't do it alone, and neither could I, so we worked side by side the way we never had before. The first time we lifted a beam together, our hands brushed, and he didn't pull away. The first time he gave me instructions, his voice wasn't sharp, it was tired, but steady. Little by little the distance shrank. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the fields gold, my father sat on the porch with me. He coughed, his voice rough, but he managed to say, "I was hard on you, too hard." He paused, staring into the distance. "I thought breaking you would make you strong. All it did was break us." The words lodged in my chest. For years I had imagined what it would feel like to hear an apology. I thought it would heal everything instantly. It didn't. But it was a start. In that moment, watching the dying light fall across the farm, I realized something. This wasn't just about saving the land or even about saving my father. It was about saving us. Rebuilding a farm isn't just about fixing fences or planting seeds. It's about sweat, patience, and starting over in a place that remembers everything you've lost. That's what made it so hard. Every broken board, every overgrown field reminded me of failure. But for the first time, I wasn't running from it. I was facing it with my father beside me. We started small. The barn roof had been sagging for years, so one morning I climbed up, with the hammer nails rattling in a tin can. My father stood below his hands, gripping the ladder, his voice guiding me. Lay the plank flat, nail it clean, don't rush it. The same man who once barked insults now offered quiet instructions, almost gentle. I listened, I followed, and when the last board was set in place, he looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in years: approval. The fields were next. We cleared patches of weeds, turned the soil, planted rows of corn and beans. My muscles screamed, blisters formed, but this time it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like progress. At the end of each day, my shirt clung to me with sweat and dust, and I'd glance at my father just to see if he noticed. He always did. Sometimes it was just a nod, sometimes the faintest smile. It was enough. We ate meals together again. At first, silence filled the table, the clink of forks and spoons louder than words, but slowly conversation returned. He'd ask how the rules looked. I'd tell him about a stubborn patch of weeds, and sometimes, rarely, he'd laugh. My mother would watch us, her eyes wet, as if she was afraid that speaking would break the fragile peace we were building. There were setbacks. One morning the plough broke and I cursed, slamming it down. My father snapped, his old anger flaring. Careful, you'll ruin it completely. For a moment it felt like the past rushing back, like nothing had changed. But instead of walking away, I forced myself to breathe. Then show me how to fix it, I said. His eyes softened, his shoulders dropped, and together we did. Those moments became lessons. Rebuilding wasn't just about tools and soil, it was about trust. We had to relearn how to speak without tearing each other apart, how to share work without turning it into war. Slowly, brick by brick, day by day, we did. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, I sat on the porch steps, exhausted. My father lowered himself beside me, his breath still rough, his body weaker than it once was. He stared out at the fields, green shoots pushing through the earth. "It's coming back," he murmured. I didn't know if he meant the farm or us, maybe both. For the first time in years, I let myself believe that we could grow again, not just crops, but forgiveness. Not just a farm, but a family. The farm was no longer silent. The creak of the windmill, the rustle of corn leaves, the lowing of cattle, it all felt alive again. But more than that, there was life in our home. The distance at the dinner table shrank. The silences between us weren't heavy anymore. They were comfortable the way silence feels between people who understand each other. It was my father who broke the barrier first. One evening, after we'd finished a long day in the fields, he sat across from me, his face shadowed by the lamplight. His hands trembled as he set down his fork, and he looked at me with eyes I barely recognized, softer, weary, but searching. "I was wrong," he said, voice rough. I froze, not sure I'd heard him right. "I thought I had to make you tough." He continued, his gaze dropping to the table. "I thought breaking you was the only way you'd survive. But all I did was push you away." His voice cracked, and for the first time in my life I saw tears fill my father's eyes. Something inside me cracked too. All the years of anger, humiliation, loneliness, they collided in that moment. My throat tightened, my chest ached, but I forced the words out. "You hurt me. You made me believe I was worthless." He nodded, his jaw trembling. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it." For a long time, neither of us moved. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then slowly, I reached across the table. My hand covered his. His skin was rough, calloused, but it tightened around mine. My mother, who had been silent all this time, let out a sob and covered her face with her hands. That night, something shifted. The walls we had built came down brick by brick. We began to talk, really talk, for the first time in years. About the past, about mistakes, about pain we had both carried. And as the words spilled out, so did the weight. In the days that followed, healing wasn't some grand miracle. It was small things. My father asking about my work, without criticism. My mother smiling when she heard us laughing in the barn. Me sitting with him on the porch, not as a rival or a disappointment, but as a son. The farm reflected it too. The crops grew taller, stronger, as if they sensed the peace returning to the soil. Every green stalk was a reminder, what's broken can grow again. For the first time in my life, I felt something I never thought I'd feel on this land. I felt at home. The day of reunion wasn't marked by any grand event. It was simple, ordinary, yet it was everything we had lost and finally regained. The kitchen smelled of bread, baking, a scent I hadn't realized I missed until it wrapped around me like a warm blanket. My mother moved between stove and table, with a quiet hum, her steps lighter than I'd seen in years. The table was set for 3, but it felt bigger somehow, as if the space around us had stretched to make room for everything we'd carried back. My father sat at the head of the table, thinner and weaker than he once was, but his posture was proud. He looked at me, not with judgment, not with disappointment, but with something far rarer, peace. We ate together. Not in silence, not with tension heavy in the air, but with laughter breaking out between bites. My father told a story about fixing a tractor in the dead of winter, and my mother rolled her eyes, reminding him he'd nearly frozen his fingers off. I added my own memories, and for once they weren't met with criticism. They were met with nods, with smiles, with belonging. Halfway through the meal, I realized my hands weren't clenched. My shoulders weren't tight. I wasn't bracing for a blow that never came. I was simply there, a son eating with his parents, and it was enough. When the meal was done, we stepped outside together. The fields stretched out before us, rows of green, swaying gently in the evening breeze. The barn, once broken, now stood strong again. The setting sun painted everything gold, as if blessing the land with a second chance. My father rested his hand on my shoulder, his grip weak but steady. "This farm will outlive me," he said quietly. "But I hope it never outlives what we found again." I swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in my eyes. "It won't," I told him. "Not this time." My mother slipped her arm around both of us, and for the first time in my memory we stood together, united, whole-heeled. The farm had once been a battlefield, the place where my family shattered. But now, as the crickets began their evening song and the light faded into night, I saw it for what it truly was, the place we were rebuilt. And in that moment, I knew we were home again.